In your view, what's wrong with South Africa today?
What's wrong with South Africa today is that people have become beholden to institutions, and we think that the institutions are more important than the people. Because we must remember what apartheid was trying to do. It was trying to divide black people in general. I am going to university for a degree, not an education. I said, I'm going to get it because I need a piece of paper so I can go get a job.
To the system.
So I can get it. That was it.
As far as the North Pole is from the South, we are bridging the knowledge gap from centuries past. We inspire you to find your true North. From Timbuktu to Alexandria, from the city of Johannesburg to New York, from the Zulus to the Dogon people, we are disrupting the knowledge economy. We are Sir Max Network.
Our physical conditions and circumstances mirror our mental conditioning and our spiritual attitude towards life. Now, this means as we heal our souls and we transform our thinking, everything that you want in your life is powerfully drawn towards you. Now, this means success originates from the soul. So there are people who do not know, are not aware that we have the souls that originates from our wounds. These wounds can be passed from generation to generation. But as we heal our souls, as we transform our thinking, there are some people who are tempted to believe that I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough because of these wounds. But once you heal these wounds and transform your thinking, everything that you've always wanted become part of your life. Ladies and gentlemen, it's such a great honor and a great privilege today that I'm hosting the host of Power Breakfast on Power FM 987. She's also the director at the Rivonia Cycle. A political think tank is on CEMEX Network today, the author of a book titled Colored, which explores identity politics in South Africa. Tessa Dooms, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Busy, but good.
Thank you for coming to the show. I'm nervous. You know, when you're hosting you are tempted to be nervous, but I'm happy to have you on the show.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's always good to engage. I love different conversations with different audiences of people. And I think it's important that we start to break down the silos of where people have conversations. So I'm always excited about new spaces.
And you are known for conversations, to be honest, especially those conversations about South Africa, about building a better nation, challenging so many issues. The work that you have done at Rivonia Circle. Are you still doing that work at Rivonia Circle?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, that's 3.5 years now in the making. We wanted to create a space where we start to rethink the politics of the country in different ways and different shapes. And particularly my passion is around community engagements and, building what I call the political agency of people in communities.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes we think about politics as something for politicians only. And really, why we do the work that we do at RC is to focus on individuals, focus on communities, and let people know that the political is actually very personal, and the political is about your power to take action. And everybody has some level of power. And I think in South Africa, we've become so disempowered. And we keep on waiting for somebody else to come around. We keep on thinking that somebody else, the next Mandela is going to emerge from somewhere and is going to come and save our conditions. And we're just of the view that everybody needs to reclaim their power in this country if we're going to move things forward. So, that work is ongoing. Just this week, we hosted an engagement on inequality. So we just, produced a new, article on can the GNU actually fix inequality in the country. So that's the kind of thing that we're doing, shaping people's thinking and really looking at how do we as people take back our power.
Wow. So basically your work is more on raising political consciousness.
Absolutely.
But are you happy? Are you seeing progress in how South Africans in general, they are accepting and they are progressing, moving towards understanding their role in a broader society and not just leave it to politicians?
This morning I was talking about American politician John Lewis. And John Lewis was a big civil rights activist, and he died 5 years ago today, actually. And I was talking about the fact that in one of his quotes, he says that our work is not for a day, a week, a month, or a year. It is a lifelong struggle. And I think that a lot of times we want quick fixes. We want a country of just, it must happen quickly. And so we get involved in the kind of activism that says we demand this now. We want this to change now. And I think what the work that we've done has taught me is that revolution is a slow process. Revolution is actually a slow burn that gets to a tipping point, and that you don't just go from people being despondent to revolution in a day.
Yeah.
You have to do the work of building political consciousness, and you start seeing how things shift for people. And I think what we've seen in the kind of work that we've done and what has happened in South Africa in the last few years is that it doesn't seem like it because there hasn't been this rapid, big shift. The ANC didn't lose power altogether. But what you see is a society that is starting to ask, how do we use our power in different ways, right?
Yeah.
So even as people are moving away from voting, for example, we are seeing people starting to ask questions like, how do I use my political voice in other spaces? We're seeing a retreat into protests. There are about 26 protests in this country on average a day. So we're not an apathetic country. We're not people who are just staying at home and doing nothing. But we also are starting to see people starting different movements. So we are seeing a lot of movements in the Eastern Cape, the Western Cape around land and housing. And people are really engaging in those spaces. Another thing that we've seen in the city of Joburg, we form part of the Joburg Crisis Alliance as the Rivonia Circle, is a reinvigoration of things like street committees and neighborhood associations, community organizations within the neighborhoods, starting to push back and organize around municipal issues. And so I think there's a bubbling up of people starting to organize themselves slowly but surely in the country. And it may not always translate into political organizing in the party politics sense, but I don't think that's the only organizing or the only politics that matters. And so I think there is this shift that's starting to happen in people saying, we're not just going to accept things, Years ago, you would have politicians just do anything and the country would just move on. Now you're seeing people respond to what politicians do or say a lot more critically, a lot more aggressively, and nothing is taken for granted in this country anymore. You can't just get away with just doing anything and think there'll be no backlash. And I think that's a good sign.
Yeah. What are your views? There's a sense that there's a shift of power from politicians to civil rights movements, where now people are realizing that power does not lie with politicians, but using organized groups. Now people are realizing where the real power is. Do you think in South Africa, are we realizing that?
We are realizing it. So there's a very famous saying in activist circles, don't agonize, organize. And so I am a big believer in don't agonize, organize. And I think what happened in the 1994 moment is that we actually came from this very organized, highly activist decade and a half in South Africa, where particularly Black South Africa was organized. And it was organized because there was a realization nobody else is there for us. We don't have a government. We don't have anything else to rely on. The political parties were banned. And so society organized itself. And then we get to the moment of transition, and it's almost like we gave over our organizing, our political capital, our political voice to government and to politicians. So political parties formalize themselves, and we're like, oh, okay, so the way that you express yourself politically is through a party. Or government now becomes a democratic government and says, okay, we'll be working, for the people, on the behalf of the people, representing the people. And then we just gave over all of our power. If you think about the period, and I'm old enough to remember the period between 94 and kind of the early 2000s, and you had this period of almost no activism in the country up until everybody remembers the TAC and that big moment around HIV and the ARVs and that debacle, that almost reignited civil society in this country and reignited activism in grassroots communities, because the 94 moment was supposed to be about the government governing. And I think that was a fundamental error that we made, because democracy was never supposed to be the government shall govern. It was supposed to be the people shall govern themselves. And I think that was a fundamental error that we made. And so having a government should not relinquish our responsibility to govern ourselves. And I think people are starting to become alert to that and aware to that, that we should be able to question government. We should be able to question institutions, that our politicians and the people who get elected are not kings and queens. They are people who are elected to serve, not to rule. And all of those things are starting to be questioned in very, I think, important ways in the country, where I think the dangers lie in the moment that we're in right now is that there's a tendency of us turning on each other. And to go back to, very known ways of organizing in our small corners, right?
Yeah.
So I'm from the colored community, and there's been a resurgence of political agency within colored communities in the last 5 years. And this idea that we must do it because colored people must get themselves organized for colored interests, I think is actually problematic because it starts putting us, because then against who? If we're, protecting our interests, it's going to be against another. And I think that one of the things that we have to just have a conversation about is that it's not a good idea for the people to turn on each other. What we need to do is we need to turn on power. We need to turn on the places where power is concentrated, where power is vested. The most powerful in society are the ones creating the biggest problems. And so it must be that we don't turn on each other in these moments, and we actually identify some big, powerful common enemies that we can reclaim power from.
So do you think this is the time to come together? But now one may ask, like for instance, the colored community, you say it wants to organize itself first. They cannot turn against power or hold power to account when they themselves are not organized. Black people, for instance, there's this notion now that the black vote, for instance, it's so much divided. So they would have to come together first, but they're actually against each other, like you are saying. So where does it begin? That consciousness, where does it begin? Say we actually have to turn against power, not against each other.
It begins by us reimagining who our people are. Who's the us, right? So just the simple thing that you mentioned now about colored communities and black communities. Part of what I write in my book is that colored people are black. I identify as black and colored, right? So in the same way, what cultural group are you from?
Xhosa.
So you're Xhosa and black.
Yeah.
No one can tell you you're not black because you're Xhosa, right?
Exactly.
I am colored and black.
And black.
No one can tell me that I'm not black because I'm colored. And that's one of the mythologies of apartheid, is creating these kind of
In fact, sorry, Tessa, that's powerful. I've never had someone put it like that.
Yeah.
No, that's powerful. What you just said. Colored and black. Xhosa or Tswana and black.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because we must remember what apartheid was trying to do. It was trying to divide black people in general, right? So I always say to people, if you look at what apartheid's racial classifications were, the word black doesn't come up on their racial classifications. They say native, colored, Indian, white. Not black. Because they know anyone who's not white is actually black.
Yeah.
And so there was a project of dividing blackness. Because blackness is about a recognition that there is a systemic oppression of particular people in society on the basis of race. And so if you are part of the oppressed, you are part of black communities right now and throughout history. And that's how whiteness has operated forever.
So it's thriving based on the whiteness is thriving on the identity disillusionment.
Absolutely. And then in the South African context today, that becomes complicated because not just white people, it's whiteness. And I make a distinction between white people and whiteness. Because whiteness is about the structures that were put in place, right? So if you think about the structures of colonialism and apartheid, it was about the way the economy is structured. It was about the way that you structure government. So they put in place these structures. Today we have black people in those same structures that have just picked up those same structures and kept it moving. Those people are participating in whiteness. You can be black and participate in whiteness. You can participate in oppressive systems that oppress the majority of black people and be black.
Yeah. How deeply entrenched, and I can sense it in what you're saying, how deeply entrenched is the identity, the identity divide, amongst ourselves, particularly, as black people, how deeply entrenched in our everyday life without even seeing it.
Yeah. It's very, very deeply entrenched in ways that we think are normal, right? So, again, going back to coloredness and colored identity, a lot of people say a party like the PA is a colored party and colored people will vote for the PA. A party like the PA actually isn't only for colored people. It actually organizes across a wide spectrum of different communities. But because of apartheid geography and apartheid spatial planning, if you go into a particular area and go and organize in South Africa, you're probably going to organize a particular racial, cultural grouping of people. That's why when we say you're going to KZN, you are probably going to go and organize Zulu people or Indian people. We know that because that was apartheid's geography. And that normalized the divisions between us. It normalized it. I remember in the early 2000s when I went to go and work in Potchefstroom at the Northwest University. I was there as a lecturer. I was young. And I was the first person who was not white or a man to work in the social sciences department as a lecturer. And I get there and within a few weeks, there are rumors on the campus. And these rumors were just some of the wildest things because they were so benign. But the rumor was I had a white colleague that I would walk to campus with because I lived really close to campus. And so people in the admin building, the colored women in the admin building would ask me, are you the girl that walks with the white guy? I'm like, how is that scandalous in 2007? I mean, it wasn't even a question about whether it was romantic. It was just so strange for them that a colored girl would be walking with a white man. That was already strange for them. Or I would get asked questions like, where in Promosa do you live? Promosa was the colored area. There was an assumption I lived in Promosa. And that's why I say we normalize the divisions that were created for our demise. The divide and rule strategy of oppression we have internalized as normal. And so when you say we must first organize ourselves amongst ourselves, our first question is, who is us? Who is the us that you identify with? For me, the us that I identify with is anybody who is poor, anybody who is marginalized, anybody who is taken out of the system, anyone who is excluded from their basic rights or from economic opportunity. Those are the us, because that's who raised me, right? I come from Eldorado Park. I was raised by that group of people. Yes, they happened to be colored, but they were not, that's not the only thing that they were. And if we look at the other things that we are, we have a lot more in common in terms of our struggles, our shared struggles, than the thing that divides us, like culture or race.
Do you think there's a need to redefine what it means to be black? I'll make an example. When you go to America, there's no colored, there's no black. It's black.
Yeah.
That's how they classify and identify, as black. Well, they put African, American, that's okay. But there's no color, there's no black. But here in South Africa, it's still there. Is there a need to redefine, to re-understand what it means to be black?
Sure, there's a need for the Black consciousness movement to find a new expression, right? Because we do need to have that conversation again. We need to start understanding what is it around blackness and black identity that unifies people as opposed to divides them. I think that's really important. But what feminists have done and have done really well is reminded us about what is called intersectionality, and that we have different identities that all intersect around each other. And we should be able to be all of who we are. And that's when solidarity becomes important. Because if we're only I'm looking for people who are just like me, and I'm only going to fight for people who are just like me, then I couldn't fight for the group of people that I just described, because I'm no longer poor. I'm middle class now because I have been one of the beneficiaries of the failed South African project. And there are a lot of us who are middle class people who are beneficiaries of a failed democratic project. And we must recognize that. But I need to know that in my privilege that I have now, I need solidarity with people who are not like me. So yes, we must define what brings us together as the black majority. But we must also say, even in those things that set us apart, I can see that there's benefit in helping you, even if you're different from me. That's what solidarity has become a more important idea for me than just us being together with those who are just like us. It's going to actually take a combined effort. So I was saying last week when we were talking about the inequality paper that Rivonia Circle did, I was saying that what the democratic governments before this, the ANC-led governments before this, had tackled were what they called the triple challenges: unemployment, poverty, inequality. And we all know there have been thousands of unemployment initiatives, right? We've all seen their poverty reduction initiatives. They're very excited about the grants and all of those things that they've done for poverty alleviation. The one thing they've not tackled head on is inequality. And we'll say, oh, no, but there's BEE. BEE is probably the only one. And we know that it has had its limitations. In some ways, it's increased inequality because it's created black billionaires as opposed to this broad-based effect it was supposed to have. And I was saying to them, the thing that we need if we're going to fix inequality is for those who benefit in society to say, actually, guys, we have to do for those who have not benefited in the society. We can't organize amongst ourselves to protect our own interests. We're going to have to give up some of our privilege. We're going to have to relinquish some of our power. Not make people fight for the power that we have. No, we have to relinquish some of it in solidarity. Because the truth is, what we're doing right now is unsustainable. What we're doing right now is unsustainable. When earning 20,000 Rand of income a month in this country makes you a top 20% earner, you know something's fundamentally wrong. And the bottom will fall out because you didn't want to extend yourself to people who are not like you.
But over 30 years into democracy, Tessa, how much have our leaders done in trying to unite this nation? And with what we're talking about, the racial divide, this identity divide, how much have our leaders done? And I'll make an example. You still have South Africa where people are interested in the president is Xhosa, therefore the president is Zulu, therefore this one is Venda, therefore. Don't you think we have come at a point as a nation where we need a leader who represents everyone, who will unite South Africa and not thrive on this racial divide to say, I've got my stronghold in this community, in this tribe, in this ethnic group?
Absolutely. And it depends on what your definition is of unity. See, what we've done is we've made unity about feelings. Do we feel good about each other? Do we feel good together? Are we stronger together? We have done a lot of unity PR, very little unity in practice, right? What does practical unity look like? What does practical solidarity looks like? It looks like basic services. It looks like basic services not having a color. Right now, your basic services have a color. In fact, the color of your basic services is called banknotes. Because we are now having to buy basic services. We're buying education. We're buying health. We're buying water. We're having to buy into it. And so if you're poor, you're left behind regardless of your color, in fact, at this point. But you level the playing fields. And somebody said it quite powerfully. They said the point of government, regulation, policy, legislation is to even the playing fields. Now you must ask yourself, have our governments used legislation to even the playing fields? Have they used policy to even the playing fields? So we've been talking about immigration, right? And the healthcare crisis and how that's now being just dovetailed with the immigration issue. If all South Africans had access to good quality public healthcare, would we care that other people are getting access to?
All.
No. Now we are having to tell poor people, you can't get until I get. Because something like healthcare is not provided for across the board to all human beings as it should be.
Do you think politicians are thriving on a racial divide?
100%. And not only racial.
Yeah.
Racial divides, class divides,
Yeah.
culture divides. They absolutely
Because
are.
they organize around that.
Absolutely are. And so the politics of division and divisiveness has become a way for politicians to get their piece of the pie, their slice of the pie, as it were. And I think it's one of the things that has made the big parties as well not do as well as they thought they would. Because, they started off with broad church politics and then they came up with factions. And all of a sudden, this politics of divisiveness has set in. And I do think they thrive off it. But there's something more that they thrive off that complicates this story, which is greed. What they care about more than this group liking them and that group not liking them is how much they can get while everybody's fighting. So while we're fighting each other, the politicians are eating. The politicians have access to the resources. The politicians don't have to answer hard questions. I said this of even what's happening in the healthcare sector. We should start asking questions about whether or not we actually have the money for those medicines. Because maybe the medicines are not there for other reasons that have more to do with corruption. And we've seen it in Tembisa Hospital. Tembisa Hospital doesn't have a foreigner problem. It has an inherent deep corruption problem that whistleblowers have died for. And so I think the politicians are thriving on us fighting each other rather than fighting them. They want us to be divided and fight each other so we don't ask their hard questions.
Let's get straight to it. Youth.
Yeah.
What should be the role of the youth now?
They must take the whole thing.
Are they?
They must lead this country.
When they are unemployed, when they are disillusioned, when they are bored, what should be the role of youth now? What is it that young people should do?
So young people's role in this country, in fact, in this continent, is absolutely crucial for one reason and one reason only. They're the majority. Young people are the majority of this country. 40 million out of 60 million people in this country are below the age of 40.
Yeah.
So just on that basis, young people need to be taken seriously and take themselves a lot more seriously. Young people need to recognize that power, the power of the numbers that they hold. One of the good things about a representative democracy is that it relies on numbers. And I think young people have not taken their numbers seriously at all. They've not organized themselves and seen that their numbers matter. In fact, if you look at the numbers just in terms of elections, right? I just gave you the stat that 40 million are below the age of 40. So just keep that in your mind. At this point, you have about 40 million registered people who can, or not registered, eligible people who are over the age of 18 in the country, right? 40 million of those exist. In the last election, 27 million registered and 16 million voted. Right? That leaves a whole lot of people who are outside of that system. Just that 10 million or so that didn't register is more than what the ANC got in 2024. The 10, 11, because the ANC got 6 million votes. In fact, in the last election when the ANC got 57%, they got 10 million votes. So if you get 11 million people together in this country, you run the country. Young people are that 11 million. And what politicians are worried about, they're worried about consolidating voters who are already in the system. So they don't pay attention to young people. Nobody is coming up with a plan on how to canvass young people's votes, how to organize them politically. In fact, they want them to not be organized politically. Yeah. They want them outside of the system because there's fewer people that they have to convince. So I tell you, all political parties, I've spoken to many politicians, are all focused on who's already voting. How do we get them to switch from ANC to DA? You'll see politicians do this whole fanfare if somebody changes their T-shirt.
Yeah.
That's because all they're doing is circulating voters who are already in the system. Which means young people who are not voting have a huge opportunity in every election to actually turn things around. And they just need to take themselves seriously. I'll tell you a story of a young man in Beggersdal in the West Rand. What this young guy did, Sandile, is his community, because he's an activist in that community, came to him in the last by-election. And they said, let's try and vote for you to be councillor.
Yeah.
And they looked into it and they realized it would be a long process. They didn't have the time, all of that. And so what they did is they approached one of the political parties and they said, we as voters here are willing to vote for your candidate if your candidate is willing to actually come to us and account every week rather than to you. Change the game.
Yeah, true.
And so the two biggest parties in that ward lost that by-election. And this other party won.
Yeah.
Because the community, led by a young man, just came up with one thing that changed the whole game. So young people just need to start thinking about, where can we start leveraging our power that we do have? I don't have a job, but we have numbers.
But what is making young people, in your view, not to participate like that? You know, I'll make an example. I was so frustrated during the elections, as most of us probably are. You see young people wearing T-shirts of a particular party.
Yeah.
And they're in the robots.
Yeah.
And then they're handing out pamphlets. And I stopped. Okay. And then I said, what is this? But no, vote for this. And I said, how old are you? I'm 27. What are you doing? Are you studying or working? No, I studied, I graduated. Why are you not working? No, I'm asking those questions to say how you went to school, you went to university to think.
Yeah.
Like, how dare you advance this type of mediocrity? Like, can't you think? But because they're giving T-shirts, they're probably bought food and all other things.
Yeah. We're not using our bargaining power well, right? And so our politics has been reduced to this very rudimentary transactionalism, where our transaction is immediate. It's about what can I get right now. And that's why we participate in this political performances of filling up stadiums. We know the majority of people who fill up stadiums are there on a transactional basis. Either they wanted a fun day out, they wanted a T-shirt, they wanted a plate of food, or they were just looking to get into a bus and do something for the day. That was it. Really, the transactional nature of it means that we want something now because we know that nothing is coming in the future.
Yeah.
We've given up on the idea that politics can produce something down the line. One of the things that is a barrier to us getting something down the line is that there's no accountability after the vote, right? Mm-hmm. So we try and get as much as we can before the vote while they're still paying attention to us, because we know they'll pay attention on this side, but not on that side.
But what is making youth not to take power into their own
system.
hands? Yeah.
So we have an electoral system that is discouraging people from participating and discouraging people because there's no accountability afterwards. So I think electoral reform is one of the biggest gifts we could give to young people before the next general election. The electoral reform we're looking for is not the one that we got, which is about independent candidates. Independent candidates is really a very small part of the bigger story of what's wrong with our electoral system. Here's what's wrong with it. The electoral system is a product of a compromise during and after Codesa. It is a product of a negotiated settlement. During apartheid, we don't realize that how people voted for there was based on constituencies, not parties. So if you were voting during apartheid, if you were white and had the right to vote, you were voting for somebody in your ward or somebody in your community, the way we vote for ward councillors now. Yeah. That's how you voted for MPs. That's how MPs were voted for. So you voted for individuals, and those individuals lived in your community. Yeah. They became members of parliament, right? So why do we not have that system now? Because part of the negotiated settlement was white people did maths. And they realized if you do that on a geographic basis and you ask people to vote within certain areas, they feel like they'll never win. They would never win the seats. So they thought, let's not go that route. Let's go for parties. And parties, that's why they say the PR system or the proportional representation system protects minority rights. It means that if you vote for parties, there's more of a chance that smaller groupings will be able to get in. Now, that's all well. You can have proportionality And you can say that that's valuable.
Yeah.
But the truth is, we have given political parties too much power. So now you can't recall a president. You can't even recall an MP. None of us have the power to recall anyone. We can vote for them, we can hire them, but we can't fire them. It's nonsense. The system is nonsense. And so if you want young people to participate, number one, don't make them have to go and beg people in parties for a position on a list. Give them the right to organize in their own right. Number two, start trusting young people in your local communities. This 2026 election that is coming up, here's my thing for young people. In the local context, you don't have to fight for party space. If you organize yourself well in advance, you can run as independent candidates.
Yeah.
What if you went to go and shake it up in every ward in this country and young people actually decided, I don't even need a lot of money. There's about 3,000 voters here. What we're going to do is we're going to try and organize ourselves and win those elections. Let me give you an example of what is possible. In the city of Johannesburg, the ANC, even though it's not 50%, it's still the biggest party. They say they have 91 councillors in a council of about 270 councillors. 4 of those councillors are PR councillors. The rest of them are ward councillors. If you went and won those ANC wards, you decimate the ANC in one election. You decimate the ANC in one election. I think young people should start backing themselves in the 2026 election. Let's test out what it looks like to get young people directly elected, and then let's set the ground for changing the electoral system to have more direct election and direct accountability, because the system gives too much power to political parties.
Let's talk about this pop culture that politicians are sponsoring towards young people, where they buy them t-shirts and all these incentives. Like you said, no, if we are going to power, we're going to give you jobs, we're going to give you projects, all these corrupt connections, yes, transactional mobilization, where young people, because of that, they can't stand for themselves. They can't stand for what they want because they are now promised this and that. As a result, they cannot think. But I want to take it even further. During the day of the elections, most of the young people, they are drunk, they are hungover, they are what? Because they are actually sponsoring this in rallies. Look at what is happening in rallies. These are young girls who are paraded, for sexual appeal for these old men who are there. This lifestyle that has been in clubs, you are able to take young people, 10 young people, 10 girls to go blow up 50,000 a night in a club. But you can never use that money for true empowerment. How is that also working against true mobilization and consciousness?
Yeah, it's definitely part of two things. One, preying on poverty. And so if you keep people poor, then you get to lure them with shiny things. And you don't even have to, the bar doesn't even have to be high. You just get to lure them with, and we scoff at the idea that it's a day out for somebody to go to a rally. If you are poor in this country, if you are a young person who's unemployed in this country, how often are you getting to have a leisurely groove and see your favorite artist perform? That's how the bar is so low. Because if you keep people poor enough, anything you give them is good enough, right? So that's one part of what brings us into the situation. The other part, Professor Stephen Friedman, one of the older academics around who talks about politics, said this about 10 years ago, and it never left me. He said, we're trying to build aspiration on the basis of comparing ourselves to apartheid lifestyles. And what he means by that is, we are trying to aspire towards how white people lived under apartheid. That's the standard. You've reached it when you can live like a white person lives. But in order to live like a white person under apartheid, you must exploit like a white person under apartheid. You must exploit the majority of people if you want white person type of aspirations. And our problem is that our aspirations are not reasonable. They're not reasonable for the majority of people. So what we regard as a good life in this country is not attainable, doesn't make sense, right? If you go to Europe, go to European countries that are rich, Norway, Denmark, whoa. Most middle-class people don't own a car. and don't aspire to own a car. In fact, owning a car is something they think is wasteful to their lives because they have public transport that's free.
That's working.
Free public transport means you don't have to own a car to live a good life. In this country, if you don't own a car, your life quality
It's a symbol.
collapses. And it's a symbol because,
Of
again,
achievement,
what
yeah.
white people could do. The white man rode a car. The white man did this. We cannot continue to replicate apartheid and expect democracy to come from it.
But Tessa, tell me, why is these things happening in universities? I mean, you would think these kids at the university, they should think better than kids who are in the village, informal settlement. You should think they are learned. But in fact, they're the ones, this culture is actually, the corridor for this culture is the university now.
So I'm probably best placed to answer this question because I was
Yeah.
a university lecturer for 7 years
Yes.
of my life. And in the university setting, what you're having is a cooking of black middle classness, right? So you're not just cooking an environment for learning. You're cooking an environment for people having a stepping stone into a better life. This is why everybody wants their child to be able to go to university, because of the cultural and social capital to a better life. I was very straight when I went to university, and I was the first person I was the third person in my community that I knew of that went to university. There may have been more, but I only knew of two others before me, right? And I said very clearly, I am going to university for a degree, not an education. I said, I'm going to get it because I need a piece of paper so I can go and get a job.
To the system.
So I can get it. That was it. I accidentally got an education. I got an education because somebody cared to conscientize me. I got an education because I happened to find the right kinds of people who gave me information that conscientized me and made me think differently about the world. That's not the majority of university students. They don't have the time for consciousness. They need to get the degree because their parents need them to be better off so that their family can be in a better position. And so the university is not the thing that you think it is. Because what it is a fast track to social capital that is much needed for black life to be better. Because we've also created one pathway. What did the white people do? They didn't just create one pathway. They're artisans. Their artisan programs were big because being a plumber, was not frowned upon because it was a real pathway to a better life. What we need to create is multiple pathways to a better life so that when you choose the university, you're not just choosing it as a stepping stone. You're choosing it because you also want to be there for all of the consciousness building and all of the things that you're talking about. But the other thing about it is really that we have to ask ourselves and understand that in terms of how young people's lives are set up right now, the aspiration towards middle classness is an aesthetic right now. It is an aesthetic. We are being sold an aesthetic. So you can't forget that this is still a capitalist society. And what capitalism is doing is selling us dreams, selling us fetishes, selling us ideas of what we need to look like and sound like and be like in order to have value. And so young people are pursuing that in their pursuits. So many of them will end up with jobs they hate. They'll end up, I think young black professionals in corporate not only experience the most racism, but have the least quality of life. Because they have to look like they are surviving and thriving while they're not actually being paid comparably to their white counterparts. They're not actually getting the benefit of the life because what they have is credit lines, not good salaries. And they have to make sure they look after everybody else who's not getting a job in a 30% unemployment environment. Being a young black professional and that life that university allows you is not as glamorous as it looks.
You know, I was a lecturer at university for 8 years. And I used to be so frustrated and tell my students, you cannot be a thinker and be loyal to a political party. We need rational voters. It must make sense before you vote for them.
Yeah.
That's why coming to university for black people, it's a privilege, and it shouldn't be. It's a right, but now it has become a privilege. So make sure that when you come here, you represent millions of young people who cannot enter this space. So you can't be loyal to a political party. That's why it baffles me for young people, educated, who've got degrees, and you've answered that beautifully, and still say ANC, and still want to defend ANC and still want to, to be loyal to it. It doesn't make sense.
But think about where young people are organized in political spaces. The majority of young people who are organized in politics are at universities because it's easy. It's easier to organize university students because they're in the same geographic space and they have the time on their hands. And so it's again opportunistic of political parties to organize themselves. In other countries around the world, university campuses are not where you join a political party. The SRC is not made up of one political party or another. It's made up of the soccer club versus the yachting society versus which political party. It's opportunistic nonsense, man. We should actually ban that thing. We should ban that thing from university campuses. If you want to go and get young people to be in politics, go and get them at their houses. Why are you getting them to university campuses? But that being said, I want to end with an example of young people in Africa that organized themselves and beat political parties. Didn't happen that long ago, in 2021. In Zambia, a group called Youth for Parliament started out. And if you go and check Youth for Parliament on social media, you won't believe my story because their social media pages have 3 followers. But the story of how they organized is a story of thousands, right? So these were young people who wanted to get into politics, young people who wanted to, get onto the party lists and all of those things in Zambia. And they were just being discarded, about 20 of them. So one day they got together in 2018 and they said, if they won't let us onto their lists across different political parties, we are going to get young people to vote for youth to go to parliament and to take up positions in municipalities, regardless of their political parties. But if it's young people are going to vote for young people, right? From 20 people under a tree with no money, and they also made the commitment not to raise funds. They got 60,000 organizers and volunteers that volunteered for free, and they got 100 people elected in 2021. 100 young people elected. The story of that is based on a few principles. Number one, find an interest group or find a reason, find a goal that you set for yourselves as young people. Number two, organize where you are. Organize where you are. The way that they organize themselves is they said, if you are canvassing further than you can walk, you've gone too far. Shake your neighbor was the campaign called. Yeah. The campaign was literally called Shake Your Neighbor. And get your neighbors to vote for young people, regardless of party. Yeah. And so that way they got in a number of different parties. They never registered as an organization. They never registered as a party. They never took anyone's money. But they got 100 young people that were elected through 60,000 volunteers, people organizing where they were. And I think that the young people in this country could learn a lot from that ethic. This thing of being loyal to a party rather than being loyal to a cause or loyal to yourself is not the way to do.
Another few months back in Botswana, just across the border, where young people decided we're going to change this.
They came out in their numbers. Yeah. They made the turnout rate 80% turned out. Yeah. And that's how they got a completely unknown candidate that was never going to make it into presidency to become president. In fact, a few weeks ago in New York, it was done again in the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party were not going to back Zohan Mamdani. He was not seen as a contender. He didn't take the money from the party. He didn't do any of that. He got 50,000 organizers to do door knocking for free for him from marginalized and working communities. And he's now become their person. He's not the party's person. He's their person.
3 questions before we wrap it up.
Sure.
What are your views on politicians behaving and being treated like demigods?
Nonsense. It's nonsense. Listen, the one thing that we are going to have to learn, not only in South Africa, but at this point, there's a new resurgence of it around the world, the celebrity culture. And I honestly think it came from the US, because the US is the one country that's made celebrities of their politicians over time. So we've had this idea that, a politician is a celebrity. And then if you dovetail that with the liberation movements and the way that our liberators became the founding fathers, they, take this on this godlike figure, we have to remember that politicians are servants.
Yeah.
They work for us.
Yes.
They work for us. And that doesn't mean you must treat them poorly. You don't treat poorly people who work for you.
Exactly.
But they certainly aren't rulers over you.
Yeah. Have you been in a meeting, Tessa, and there's some minister coming, some mayor coming? Have you seen
I don't do
what
this
happens?
protocol thing. I worked in the planning commission. I was a planning commissioner under both President Zuma and President Ramaphosa. And this thing of calling President Zuma Ubaba, I said, no, guys. He's not my father, he's my president.
Like everything stops.
And I can't give him the reverence of my father because I have a very different relationship from my father than I should with my president. I have to hold my president accountable. I'll never hold my father accountable culturally. It's not going to work out for me, right? And so we have to think about the way we imagine what a politician, what an elected person is. An elected person is somebody who needs your vote to hire them.
Absolutely.
And the day we get a recall clause in this country that allows us to fire people, we'll see them behave better.
In your view, what's wrong with South Africa today?
What's wrong with South Africa today is that people have become beholden to institutions, and we think that the institutions are more important than the people. We must be ready to question, challenge, and light up any institution if we think it's not working for us. I'm a constitutionalist, but I'm not married to the Constitution. If we must change it, we must change it. It's okay. It will survive. The Constitution will survive being changed. And I'm not saying it change it every day for any person's whims. But part of the reason why I'm somebody who believes that the national dialogue should happen, as long as it happens in a street by street, community by community, in different places. Because I think we need to have hard debates about what needs to change in our structures. What about the structures that we are calling democracy do we need to change? And I think we must start having those debates. We're not having debates in this country. We're just howling at each other. And if we use the national dialogue to go to community level and actually have the difficult debates, and those things actually turned into a referendum, if we in a year's time were able to have a referendum on some of the big issues, I think it would take us forward.
Out of curiosity, as we wrap up the conversation, your thinking, your brilliance, make me think of someone whom I wonder if you've ever crossed his path before. The man that I held, so much in high esteem. Actually was convinced at some point that he was in the upper echelons of thinking capital talk radio host, Eusebius Makaiser.
Yes, our paths crossed. I am in the media space today and in politics mostly because of Eusebius. When Eusebius came into the radio space, that was the first time I started engaging radio, because you also start to think about somebody like me can be in different spaces. And he actually said to me, he said, you need to back yourself more and believe that your voice matters. And he was a big motivation for me in terms of getting into spaces where I'm willing to share my views in media spaces. And and the 2 days before he died, he contacted me to ask me to be on his podcast. And so we were actually finalizing details that morning, and then I heard of his passing. So it was a huge loss for me in many ways, because he was a lodestar in many, many ways.
May his spirit continue to live forever.
Absolutely.
How has it been being the host of Power Breakfast on Power FM?
Hardest job of my life. I will say it openly and freely, hardest job of my life. But such a honor to have a platform where people are actually engaged on a daily basis. I do not take it for granted. I do not take it lightly. And I believe that we need to lend ourselves to be facilitators of national conversation. And that's why I think the role is important, but hardest job in my life.
Well done, Tessa. And you're doing well in that show.
Thank you.
Fresh voice, a woman. I'm not sure if there's ever been a woman
For talk?
for
No.
talk, breakfast, especially at Power.
Yeah. No, for talk, there hasn't been a woman
Yeah.
on any talk platform. So women have been, at least for breakfast. So women have been in the kind of 9 o'clock slot and onwards.
Yeah.
But I was also stunned to realize that a woman had not held the talk breakfast role in any station. So
Tessa Dooms, thank you very much for coming to the
thank you
show.
for having me.
And please come back to
I
the
will.
show.
Absolutely.
Help us to build this platform.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, that's how we come to the end of this episode. If you enjoyed it, please do us one favor. Subscribe to this channel. That's the only way we can bring you high quality and epic conversations. My name is Samex Kamako.